Okay, in this video we will try to get an idea about the custom REST handler in Splunk. Okay, now in next few videos we'll be working on examples on how we can create custom REST endpoint in Splunk. Okay, so why we need a custom REST endpoint in Splunk? If you remember from my previous videos I created regarding the REST endpoints in Splunk, right? So we talked in detail like what is REST and how REST has been implemented in Splunk, right? So whatever you see in Splunk web, like you can run a search, you can create alerts, everything, right? You can create a safe search, you can manage the access level details of knowledge objects, right? So everything can be done using a REST endpoints as well. And if you remember, like I created some videos on how we can leverage the Splunk REST endpoints to achieve some of the stuffs we can do from the Splunk front end, right? So now it possible that you are developing some app and you have some requirement which is not supported by Splunk out of the box. In those cases maybe you can go for Splunk REST endpoint, so you can create your own Splunk REST point and handle it. Okay, so why custom REST endpoint? Because custom endpoints are basically user defined endpoints that let you extend the Splunk enterprise REST API in your app. Okay, so that's the extension part, so you can build your own logic over there, right? And expose it so that your program or maybe outside the program it can consume your REST API. Now, and as I said, like this is the way of programmatically interact with the Splunk enterprise using normal like HTTP GET, post, put and delete operations, right? Now, and I also explained this stuff as well, like each and every stuff you can do from the Splunk web, it can be done fully from the Splunk REST API only, right? So using this custom REST endpoint you basically create your own specific needs, right? So basically you're meeting your own specific needs over here. Now how it works, this is important to understand over here. Okay, now let's say from an end user means like we will try to see like who is consuming this particular REST endpoints. Okay, it sends a request to Splunk. So this is a client request. Basically Splunk, the main process is the Splunk, right, in Splunk. So that basically handles all these requests over here. Okay, now that's the primary handle. Now if you remember, like when I talked about different REST endpoints in Splunk, if you remember the URL we were constructing, right? So over there we are always giving this management port 8089 over there, right? So Splunk D is the main process handler over here. Now you can also expose your REST endpoints in Splunk web port as well, which is by default 8000. Okay, but for that you need to create another configuration file called web.conf file. Now either Splunk 8089, port 8089 or port 8000, any one of it, depends on your configuration, can handle your request, but Splunk will be the main process which will basically govern the other processes over here. So client request first go to the Splunk. Let's say we'll just first, I'll just try to explain on based on this Splunk port only. Okay, now this Splunk, it knows there is a custom handler. Okay, REST API handler, there is a script. Basically let's say we have a Python script which a class. We'll see in next video how to create those stuff as well. Okay, it knows there is a custom handler which can handle this particular request, but how it knows, basically this script and the Splunk process can interact with each other. But how Splunk knows there is a custom REST handler exists because of this restmap.conf and the web.conf. Okay, the restmap.conf is the main file over here, where you will basically define your endpoint name and which script is handling that endpoint, which class is handling that endpoint, and what are the HTTP options like get, put or post. Those methods it supports, everything will be defining over there. And as I told, if you want to expose your REST API to the Splunk web port, you need to configure this web.conf over here. Okay, so once Splunk knows, this process knows there is a custom REST API handler which can handle this particular request. What it will do, it's basically a class. This script is nothing but, if you see it, it's a class, right? So it will basically create an object of that class which will basically serve the purpose. Now once Splunk knows like there is a handler, it basically creates two child process over here. One is that setting up this request, right, by reading this restmap.conf and web.conf, and it will basically knows which class is basically representing this particular request. Then it will create an object of this class, and then it will execute that code, right, inside this script, basically the class level code, to create the response over here, right? So these are the two child process Splunk creates. Okay, now this is, I'm talking about a concept called persistence and non-persistent. Now this is the non-persistent mode. Okay, so if you see this architecture over here, if we understand this non-persistent one, then it will be easier to understand the persistent one. Okay, so these two child sub process will be responsible for setting up and handling that request, right? Now the response needs to go to the end user over here, right? So from this particular script will also interact with this process, means Splunk process, for setting up and giving the response over here, right? Then Splunk will be rerunning that response as a server response to the end user over here. So this is the overall flow over here. Okay, now if you see it over here, for a single request, Splunk is creating two child processes over here, right, which is expensive, definitely. Now to reduce that one, Splunk newly introduced, that is I think from Splunk 6.4, so there is a persistent mode. Okay, now which will basically create a single process per request over here. Okay, now we will see that in later stage, but that's the main concept over here. Now if I just go to the next slide, so if you just remember that whole process life cycle over there, right? So based on that, now it is possible that in Splunk we can create REST endpoints in 4 different ways. Okay, one is this non-EAI and EAI. Okay, so non-EAI is the script based, and EAI is the extensible administration interface. This is also script, Python script, but it's somehow different. Okay, we'll see that difference very soon. Now both of them supports non-persistent and persistent mode over here. Okay, now as I said, it is possible that we can create REST endpoint in Splunk in 4 different ways, but generally the non-persistent ways are not recommended by Splunk, because persistent mode is performance wise better, and all the future developments in Splunk related to Splunk custom REST endpoints will be mainly done by the persistent handlers only. Okay, so for that, maybe we will not concentrate more on the non-persistent mode. We will mainly concentrate on the persistent mode over here. Even the custom REST endpoints will be creating, all will be persistent mode as well, because persistent mode supports all the functionality we have for non-persistent mode as well, and its performance wise is better, and also in terms of compatibility it is better as well. Okay, now if you see it over here in terms of Python version, which is support Word, all versions of Python supports this non-persistent mode, but Python version 6.4 and up will only support that persistent mode over here. Okay, now couple of things coming up over here is what do we mean by EAI and non-EAI. I have given you some hint about the persistent mode and non-persistent mode over here as well. Okay, now what is EAI? That means Extensible Administration Interface. So EAI designed to facilitate the more rapid development of REST interfaces on C++ backend. Okay, now and if you see, like, this EAI is actually used by Splunk code developers as well to easily extend the user interface to accommodate the new administrative capabilities. Now if you see the safe search management window, right, where you can see the list of safe search name, you can change their corresponding access stuff, right? So those things is actually we can implement using EAI over there. Even I think Splunk also internally use EAI to achieve those stuff as well. Okay, now it provides services like pagination, role-based access control, namespacing to the developer. So you do not need to code on your own this stuff. It is automatically handled by over here. Okay, we'll see how to achieve those stuff as well over there. So you basically, the main important part is like you do not need to code this stuff on your own. Okay, now EAI is typically associated with the management of custom Splunk configurations file. So if you have some configurations file which is very custom to your app, maybe you can look for a EAI based REST endpoint so that all this management stuff will be easily handled over here. Okay, now for an example, like how we can identify whether it's an EAI endpoint or it's an script based endpoints is the restmap.conf. So here is an example over here. See, it will have two stanzas. One stanza is this admin, then colon, you have to give a unique name over here. Now under the match you have to give the endpoint name over here. So that will become your endpoint. That means when the endpoint URL will be constructed, right? So this will be used as an endpoint name over here, and members will be the different handler name. Okay, that means the script which will basically handle this request over here. Okay, so if I just see it over here, so this configuration like admin colon the unique name configuration is basically maps the handler name with the URL called services slash endpoint, right, slash the handler name. So that will be the endpoint name for EAI based handlers. Okay, we'll see the script based handler is little bit different, the URL configuration. Okay, but this is the URL this will be become the end URL for EAI based handlers. Okay, now for in restmap.conf there will be another stanza called admin_external. Okay, which is basically hold the details of this handler over here. Okay, what type of handler it is, whether it's a Python code or the Python file name. Generally this file will be residing on in the bin folder of your app. Okay, what kind of actions it supports, like list, edit, create, remove, reload, those stuff. And for the persistent mode, to turn on and off the persistent mode, you can have this one, handler persistent mode, whether true or false. True will become the persistent mode. Okay, now we will soon see the persistent mode details as well. Okay, we have seen basically the non-persistent mode, like because Splunk D will be creating the two processes, right? So that's why it will become the persistent mode, sorry, non-persistent mode over there. So these are the details of the endpoint. Okay, so this is how you will identify this is a EAI based handler. Now what is the script based? Script based, as the name suggests, it's the raw interface for writing REST interfaces. So you will have more control over here. So you can create your own codes over here for pagination, like for the multiple output formats or role based access. Everything you have to code on your own over here. Okay, so that means you have more freedom to work on over here, right? And script based handlers are generally when you want to implement some custom functionality in your app through REST API. Maybe in those cases you will be using the script based, and when you want to manage your custom configurations in your app, maybe the EAI based handlers will be the better choice in those cases. Okay, now how to identify the script based handlers in restmap.conf. So there will be stanza called script, then a unique name over here, through which you will be identifying this is a script based one. And if you see, it has a similar kind of configurations like match, where you'll be giving the endpoint name, you'll be giving the script name, basically which Python script is handling this request. Now script type, so this is the way here you can create a persistent or non-persistent one, because when you will give the script type as persist, then it will become a persistent handler. Otherwise, if you give the script type as Python, it will become a non-persistent handler over here. Okay, now here the handler class name you are mentioning over here. So the same handler script name, and inside that script you will be having a handler class which will be mentioning over here, and the other stuff like whether it is requiring authentication or not, would be the output modes, pass payload, pass HTTP headers, cookies, and the capability as well, role level capability as well. You can mention it over here. Okay, so these two, like the match and script, will become the basically map the handler to the URI. And if you see it over here, for script based handler, the endpoint will be something like services slash the endpoint name. It is For EAI based, it was slash the handler name as well, but for script based, this will become the endpoint name over here. Okay. So, and this handler name will becoming the class that's serving that particular request over here, and this capability will be handled by this capability one. That's in role-based access control over here. Okay, so we got a fair idea about what is EAI and what is script-based, basically non-EAI handlers over here, right? Now there are another two columns over there called persistent and non-persistent. We already saw what is non-persistent one, right, when we talked about the diagram over here. So now what is persistence? So the root of this discussion will be the same diagram over there which we discussed few slides back, right? So the Splunk process received the request on port 8089, then the Python script is getting invoked. So basically when it get the request over here, so it runs this particular script over here. Okay, now the script loads the REST handler using Python exec file method and handling of the system input and output, standard input and output over here. So if you see it over here, as we seen, it does this twice for every REST call, right? Once to set up the REST handler, another to execute it, right? Now setup means it's basically creates an object of this class over there, right, which is handling that request. So now this is some kind of process intensive over here, right? So to overcome this one, Splunk introduced this persistent mode as well. So, okay, so that means in persistent mode, the Splunk process will create or execute only single process per test call over here. Okay, now the process will persist until it is idle for a period of time 60 seconds. So this is important. Currently this is not configurable, this 60 seconds. The process will be capable of handling multiple requests. That is perfectly fine over here. Okay, but if it is getting idled for 60 seconds, Splunk will rip that process. Okay, so no developer actions is needed over here. It will be automatically terminate that particular process over here. Okay, now during the non-idle interval, it can service multiple requests. That's not a big deal. Okay, now the execution wise, the difference is in persistent mode is the Splunk will also, again the similar way, this first step will be similar, right? The Splunk process will be receiving the request on port 8089, but the script invocation will be different over here. If you see the script name, and it will also include with a keyword called persistent behind the scene. This everything you will see it over here, everything will be happening behind the scene, but it is good to know over here like how the persistent one is different from the non-persistent handlers. Okay, so when the script will be called with the persistent input or parameter, it will be a persistent mode. Then it will be, so behind the scene what will happen, like the class objects will be created only once. That means the init method of that particular class will be called only once over there. Okay, it will not create that particular handler class object each and every REST call over there. That's the main difference between a non-persistent and persistent mode over here. And if you see, like, persistent mode is definitely good for performance stuff, right? And we are creating a less number of processes over here as well. Okay, so if I just do the mapping of persistent and non-persistent handler for EAI and non-EAI based, so if you see for script based handler, right, so there is the same file or same class which will be handling both the non-persistent and persistent mode, but it depends on how you are configuring in the REST map. It will be invoking that part of the code over there. Okay, and for EAI based handler, this non-persistent one is the best REST handler, and the persistent one is the persistent server connection application handler. So mainly we will be working with these two guys. Okay, because non-persistent mode anyway not recommended by Splunk. Now this, if you're just interested to know what is the script path, maybe when we will create some content on we'll be creating a new REST API handler, I will be showing you the scripts as well. For script based persistent and non-persistent handler, this is the path under side packages Splunk admin.py. For EAI non-persistent handler, this is the path under side packages Splunk rest init.py, and under etc system bin sc_res.py, and this is the EAI persistent handler, which is present in the under side packages Splunk persistcon application.py. And if you see it over here, if you are moving to Splunk 8, so there is a two Python versions Splunk supports, right? 2.7 and 3.7. So both of those versions basically supports all these persistent handlers over there. So that's why I did not give any Python version over here. Okay. So based on your need, maybe you need to work on corresponding Python versions over there. I think by default it will be Python 3 only, because all are moving to Python 3 direction only. Now, as I said, the non-persistent one definitely we will not be concentrating on, because all the future level enhancement or whatever stuff will be concentrated on the persistent one only. So we'll be mainly concentrating on persistent handlers, both the EAI and non-EAI. Okay. So in the next video, we will try to create an non-EAI based script based handler first. Okay. And then we will eventually create a EAI based handler as well. Okay. See you in next video.